Welcome to a special bonus episode of the Men and Community Podcast. On this episode, Matt and Carlo share all about their Costa Rican adventure. Matt talks about being intentionally appreciative, and Carlo shares how travel can speak to our very souls. Thank you for joining our community. Pura vida, everyone. All right, my friend. Welcome to episode 3.5. 0.5. This is our first ever bonus episode, and it is all about our trip to Costa Rica that we went to at the end of November, beginning of December. And I'm going to go ahead and start and say, what a trip.
Yeah, absolutely. It was absolutely incredible experience. Beautiful weather, beautiful people, beautiful experiences, and right off the jump, huge shout out to everybody that was on our tour with us. We know that you're probably at least half, if not more, of the audience who's actually going to be listening and watching this. So, thanks for that. Also, we're really, really thankful. And, before we go too far, the trip wouldn't have been what it was without all of you.
Yeah, every single one of you contributed in some way and some energy level to what that trip was. And I don't think if we were missing one person for another person that it would have been the same trip. Just everybody was such a unique puzzle piece to that entire experience. It was so amazing to have all of you.
Yeah. So I guess, we wanted to start from the beginning, how this trip came about. And, I've done a few tours, group travel like this in the past, different places in the world. And so I already had this kind of preconceived idea that this was the type of trip that I wanted to go on. And Costa Rica has been on the list. I mean, it's realistically been the list as far as my travel aspirations for a long time. And so it's something that I've been really excited about. And as we've emerged from the pandemic and travel has become more viable, I, thought to myself, what, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's book this trip. And I remember Carlo and I were walking through the shopping mall one day, and I turned and I'm like, oh, by the way, booked this trip in November, December. You coming? And with I don't even think I told you where we were going. Probably and you're not. Just like, yeah, great. I'll book it when I get home. And it was just that fast.
Well, and the other side of the coin is that Costa Rica was not on my travel list at all. I never even looked at the idea of going to it. So when you mentioned this trip to me, like you said, you didn't really even tell me where it was, but the concept of traveling with you was so alluring to me that I wanted to do it. And it's not like we've never traveled together before. In fact, we had gone to Mexico into Las Vegas in May of this year. And it was when we got back from the trip that you instantly send me the itinerary. Like literally we landed, woke up the next day, surviving from Las Vegas, and I get an email, hey, by the way, here's the itinerary and all of the details for the Costa Rica trip. So get that booked whenever you're ready.
Which, as I'm thinking about it, is really ironic. When we got home from Vegas, you were the one that was sick. And when we got home from Costa Rica, I was the one that was sick.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I got COVID when we got back from Vegas.
For me, thankfully, it wasn't COVID, but we're still 3 weeks out and I still have a cough. So yeah, I guess karma.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, everybody's got to have it, I guess, a little bit.
So why don't you start? Like, this was your first time going on a traveling adventure of this type, right? Like group travel. And since we're really all about community and that's really what we're leaning into, at least in the scope of this podcast and other areas of our life, tell us about what it was like for you traveling in that sort of environment.
Well, even bigger than that, this was the first opportunity that I had to travel to somewhere new that wasn't in some way work related, probably in a decade. Wow. Maybe a little bit longer. So I knew that going on this trip, if it was a good trip, which I had no doubt that it was going to be, that it was going to reignite the travel bug for me. And traditionally, my travel has been to, I've seen a lot of Europe, I've seen Hong Kong, but it was all done by myself, right? Like I had a group of friends. Where are we going today? What are we doing? It was all planned by us, and it was very ad hoc planned. It wasn't, we had no itinerary laid out. So having been a very busy and stressful year, the idea of going on this trip where everything was kind of planned out for us was very alluring to me. So the idea that we did something new pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And it was a constant nonstop, we're going to do this and then this and then this and then this. It made the whole trip feel like it was significantly longer than it was, which is something that kind of blew me away.
Yeah.
Right? Like by the time the second or third day rolled around, it felt like we'd been there a week or a week and a half.
And well, and you said that exact same thing to me. We woke up in our hotel room on day 3 and you're like, have we been here 2 weeks already? Just, it felt like time was going so slowly.
And then the group aspect, the community aspect of that, because we were doing so many new and exciting things with people that, you know, brand new people, the only people that we knew were each other. It made you feel this sense of community and closeness with those people instantaneously. Right. So, you know, even the second day in, you're having a conversation with the person that you went rappelling with the day before, like you've known this person for years.
Yeah.
And that just led to this amazing environment of closeness and vulnerability that was really cool in the group. Because, you know, of course, we talked a little bit about our lives back home. We talked a little bit about what we wanted out of the trip with all of these people. But at the same time, we talked about things in depth. And some of the struggles, you know, some people in specific in mind of the group, we talked about, you know, the struggles that we've had in our lives and the things that we were, you know, growing through and why these trips meant so much to us. And that's not the kind of conversation you normally have with someone you've known for 4 days.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. And I think to me and we've talked about this on previous episodes, right? It's the idea that the second that we've got something in common, your ability to relate to somebody else just skyrockets, right? So for us in that trip, all 30 of us were coming together with a genuine desire to explore the world.
Yeah.
An excitement about new experiences and traveling, and a desire to not do it alone. Yeah. Right. And those 3 things really brought this group together in a really, really, really special way. And I think that the second you have something very obviously in common, it just really paves the way to cool things. And to your point, you know, on these tours, we were spending 2-3 hours on a bus every couple of days. Well, when you're going from zip lining and whitewater rafting to sitting on a bus for 3 hours, first of all, you've got these amazing adrenaline swings.
Yeah.
And then you get the opportunity to feel like you have a space to really reflect on your life at a more macro level. And then you get to share this with people. And it just amazing times.
Yeah, because everybody going through these adrenaline rushes is coming out of it. Because you have some people that like dove right into it. Like the idea of whitewater rafting, as scary as it may have been.
We almost literally dove into it a couple times.
Yeah. Just wanted to go and have this adrenaline rush. But then some people, it was a big leap of faith for them to do that. And that is something that, you know, someone on the trip came up to me at one point and said like, well, like you seem so comfortable doing these, you know, things. Aren't you scared? And my answer that, yeah, absolutely. But I am willing to be scared and willing for the very small possibility for something bad to happen. Just for the much larger possibility of the excitement and the growth I will get out of this. And she goes, okay, I'm going to do those things too.
So tell me more about that, because you and I did most of the excursions very, very differently, with the exception of whitewater rafting when we were in the same boat. You did most of the excursions at the front of the line. You're in there, you're ready to go. You're literally diving off the waterfall first or near first. And I was the opposite. I was at the very back of the line. I was typically the last, if not one of the last ones to do any given thing, whether it was rappelling, ziplining, what have you. So tell me more about what that was like for you, why you wanted to be the first one. Like, what was that like?
I've always kind of been that way. I wouldn't say I sit in my fear, but I sit in the anxiety of that fear. So the earliest memory I kind of have of this is the diving board at the Shoaldice pool as a kid.
Nice.
And it was this idea that there's this diving board that by no means is tall. It's maybe 15 feet, something like that. And I would stand on the end of the diving board, and the first jump was always the scariest. Because after that, your body got used to the adrenaline, it got used to the anxiety, and it got used to the thrill. And I've always kind of lived, those moments of, well, what's the worst that can possibly happen? And if it does, am I willing to live with the consequences of that for the best that could happen?
Yeah.
Right. So I've always climbed that diving board and jumped off first, just so that I could have the maximum amount of fun after that. So that's why I wanted to be in the front of it. But it's super intriguing that you asked this question, because I remember doing zip lining, which was on my birthday in the cloud forest. And the final zip line was like 1.3 kilometers. And I did it Superman style. So face first, arms behind your back kind of thing. And if anybody's ever been ziplining, there's the rollers, the bearings that take you along the line. They're loud and they're not comforting sounding. They sound like they are screeching and about to fall apart. And
like the squealers of your brakes are on full.
Oh yeah, like you're like, this is not the way this is supposed to sound. And the safety carabiners is being dragged along and it's scraping, and you look at it and it's a little worn and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, I remember going down through this and thinking to myself, if all of the safety measures were to fail and I were to plummet into the rainforest and die, that'd be a cool story to tell.
Someone else is going to be telling it.
Well, or whether you believe in the afterlife or not, or reincarnation or whatever, that would be a fun story to tell everybody else in the afterlife. Like, that's how I died, and I'm completely okay with that.
Yeah. So
that was kind of how I did it. So what was your perspective at the back?
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. So a couple things here. First one is I've been really, really privileged to get to do a lot of those eco-adventure style things. I've been whitewater rafting, I've been ziplining, I've been rappelling, albeit never in somewhere as absolutely stunning and incredible in terms of ecosystems and biodiversity and all of these things. Yeah. But I've done those things, so I have some experience with them. And so for me, two things. First, it was really, really special for me to create the space for people who haven't had the chance to see those before. I think it would have taken something away if I had been at the front of the line to do something that I'd already done, instead of having someone like yourself go and experience those jitters, like the what in my stomach? What happens when you got jitters? What is that?
Butterflies?
Thank you. Butterflies. Wow, that was weird. The butterflies in your stomach of doing that thing. So that was kind of the first one. But the second one was, we're often just so lined up for things. Some of those excursions, you're in line waiting for the next zip line or the next rappel. And so I liked being at the back because it meant that after I could kind of slow play my walk to the next station, right? Yeah. You were smart. You did it the other optimum way, is you get out in front and then you've got no one to wait on either. But I just got to like hang back and really just fully absorb the jungle or wherever it was that we were. So that's kind of why I did it. I will say though, there was kind of a funny moment. For those of you that know me well, you'll know this story, and I told most of the people on our trip about this. But I previously in another life was a rock climbing instructor, and at one point I actually was dropped off a climbing wall and fractured my spine. I fractured my L2 vertebra. Jury's out. Maybe that makes me a terrible rock climbing instructor. Regardless, that happened, and I found myself almost telling that story right before the first rappel, which was a 130-foot waterfall. And I literally stopped myself mid-sentence, bit my tongue, and I remember the 3 or 4 people that I was telling the story to were like, you just stopped talking. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to tell you later. Just
smart.
Felt like it just was not the right time to share the story about how I fell from great heights.
Yeah. No, probably smart. Probably smart. Yeah, because a lot of the trip for you, I can think of one experience in particular, and I won't steal the thunder of sharing the experience, but you got to do a lot of it the word alone isn't correct, but you got to do it in such a way that was solitary enough to allow you to spend some time inward, right? You know the experience I'm talking about, I'm sure. And watching you from, you know, an outside perspective on some of those moments, I could tell how important they were to you. And I'm really happy that you got to have those in the ways that you wanted, because it's not to say that I don't want those moments and didn't have those moments, but to me, I needed the thrill of the community and the thrill of other people around me for a lot of those.
Yeah.
But you, I don't think, needed that in the same way I did. You needed those more solitary moments. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That definitely wasn't something on my radar to share in this episode, but I'm glad you did. We had the chance to be a part of an initiative to be able to offset the carbon footprint of our trip and of our travel. And it's something that the company that we toured with, shout out to Kentucky, is something that was really passionate, a passion project for them. And it's part of their Make Travel Matter program, something that they really value is being able to give back in ecological ways that are meaningful in the communities that they run tours. And so we had the opportunity to go to a local family-run farm and plant some trees. And the way that it was presented to us, we met the family that lives and works on this farm. And we were told that we were going to go and plant these trees on their property. And we were going to do this in groups. And again, like I just explained, I was at the very back of the line, just kind of like doing my own thing, admiring the banana. Do you know bananas are herbs? Anyway, maybe you knew that. Maybe you remembered that. You obviously didn't spend as much time with our Kyle, the horticulturist. I almost called him by his nickname, but that's probably not that respectful.
No, we'll get permission for that first.
We'll get permission first. And we'll post in the comments. Anyway, turns out that bananas are like the world's largest herb.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was in the back admiring the banana herb, and we're kind of forming groups as the line goes to get these trees. And it's, you know, the first 4 people take this tree, go find a spot to plant. The second 4 people go. And I was at the back of the line, and, you know, I was ready to go hang out with the final group to get their tree. And I noticed that our tour guide had 1 tree sapling left. And I just kind of went up to him like, hey, can I plant that tree? And he looked at me and was like, yeah, you can. And he gave it to me. And so I got to plant my own tree. And that was a really meaningful opportunity for me, because I love having moments to connect with the earth in what feels like very spiritual, very meaningful ways to me. I did the same thing anytime that we touched the ocean.
Yeah.
And so planting that tree was a really special moment for me, because, you know, it was something that I will always have. That is something that I own, that's mine. Not the tree, but the experience, to be clear. And it was something that was really meaningful because of it.
And I have this wonderful photo of you. I think I've shared it with you, where you've got your hand down to the dirt now after planting this tree, and your eyes are closed, and you can see it's like this moment of you giving your blessing and your energy to this tree. And it's probably one of my favorite pictures of you, because it encompasses very much of who you are. So very cool. Okay. So in the interest of time, we don't want this episode to be too long, as it is a bonus episode.
Yes.
But what would be one realization or confirmation from the trip, an idea that you've brought home that you want to share?
Yeah. And it's something that is constantly reinforced in my life, whether it's work or pleasure or travel or whatever. It's something that keeps coming up, and it was reaffirmed for me on this trip. I love travel. I'm very, very lucky now. I think that my travel count is somewhere in the low 20s for a number of countries I've been to, something like this. Wow. Like I've very blessed to have traveled fairly extensively at this point in my life. But every time that I go somewhere, and every time that I come home and somebody asks me, tell me about your trip. What was the most memorable experience of your trip? Almost to a T, everything has to do with the people that I shared it with. And don't get me wrong, Costa Rica is absolutely stunning. For those of you thinking of planning a trip, I would highly recommend it. It's an absolutely incredible place to be for a whole lot of reasons. But the trip wouldn't have been what it was without the group that we were there with. And there was times where I probably seemed a little like aloof, kind of just watching or a bit withdrawn from the group at times. If any of you noticed that were on the trip with us. And it's because I was taking moments to be very intentionally appreciative, because I think that as much as every place in the world is unique and there's something beautiful about experiencing a new place, a new country, there's even something more magical about taking 30 people, putting them in one place and seeing what sorts of dynamics, relationships, experiences, laughter, conversations, community is formed because of it. You know, you got to think that every single one of us is one of however many billions of people on this planet. And so the odds of 30 people being in the same place at the same time, enjoying the same experience is billions to one. And we got to be a part of that experience that 30 of us share, that no one else will ever share again in that exact way. And that is something that's really powerful to me. And that is something that I will never take for granted. And it's something that, as beautiful and as amazing Costa Rica was, it was the people, and it's always the people that make an experience for me.
I would agree wholeheartedly with you. Like the people just made so much of this trip. And it's always difficult because we split off and we go our separate directions. We're blessed. There was several of the people on the trip that were from our local area and we're going to get to see again, which is amazing.
In fact, Kyle, the horticulturist, just texted me a few minutes ago.
He sure did. So we're excited for that. But of course, there are people that we hope to see again, but we may never. Yeah. And we have to be okay with that. It was a very somber goodbye at the end of the trip, again, because even in this short period, we felt so close with these people. And for any of you that are listening that were on the trip with us, we value you so much. We're so happy to have met you. We hope that you'll be parts of our lives moving forward, but we want you to know just how much you meant to us. And I guess this kind of brings me to my big realization, my big idea from the trip. So I remember there was this point, we had just finished walking up the stairs as we got to our hotel in Tamarindo. And as we look over, the sun was starting to set. And our hotel, the pool area, had this beautiful view of the bay and the sun coming down. And to me, it felt like the whole group, but I'm sure in actuality, it was just a couple of us, where I looked out across the bay and there was this moment of sincere quiet and sincere connection with no one else but myself in the moment. And I remember thinking to myself, these are the moments that speak to my soul. And as I ruminated on this concept a little bit as time went by throughout the rest of the trip, I came to the idea that it's the moments like that that feed your soul so that you can grow into the person you're truly meant to be. And after coming to this realization, I realized that I always knew that that was something as human beings we are supposed to have in our lives. We're supposed to intentionally feed ourselves those moments. But that was the moment I realized, as much as I know I'm supposed to have it, I realized I don't want to live a life without it. And I will do anything it takes to continue to feed myself those moments so that I can become the absolute best version of myself. Because without those experiences, without those moments, without the realizations, without the community and the people and the conversations and everything, I don't think you can gain enough experience in the world to truly call yourself the best version of yourself. Yeah. So that was my big takeaway from that trip. And it's a concept and idea I'm sure I'm going to expand upon in a lot of different ways. But that was the really big thing that made the entire trip what it was for me.
That's beautiful. And I totally agree. I think that's part of the reason why I value travel so much is we spend so much of our life on autopilot.
Yeah.
So much of our life being busy for the sake of being busy. And travel is a beautiful opportunity, an expensive opportunity, but a beautiful opportunity
yep.
to to remind ourselves and to lean into those moments, those things that feed our soul.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point, guys, I want to thank you for joining us for our episode 3.5 and a half. One of my favorite things about podcasts, if you have any of them that you listen to for long enough, you'll always find those quirks, those inside jokes that started in the first few episodes of the show. And I feel like that might be one, 3.5 and a half. So that's always great. I'm happy that we could put together this little episode. I'm sure we'll talk about Costa Rica and that trip and the people on it more as time goes by. But I think we're going to say that's it. Is there anything else you want to share?
The only thing that I wanted to say to leave you with is a phrase that we learned in Costa Rica.
That's right.
Which was Pura Vida, which the direct translation is, a simple life.
Yeah.
And, folks in Costa Rica will use it as thank you, you're welcome, good morning, just the standard greeting.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. But I think it's really valuable for all of us to think about the ways that we can come home, come back to reality and live the Pura Vida.
Yeah. And the people that I've told Pura Vida to back here in Canada, a lot of them are like, oh, it's kind of like Hakuna Matata. I'm like, yeah, somewhat similar. And again, it's that simple idea that if you could live your entire life living a pure life, searching for those moments in the autopilot, in the simple parts of everyday life, can you imagine how much more magical your life would feel? So an amazing concept. And it was one of those things that even if it was said as a you're welcome from a person that you bought a drink from, it still felt genuine. It never felt like, who is this touristy quiche thing? It's no, Pura Vida, go live your pure life. I'm going to live mine. Thank you for coming. Yeah.
And on that note, thank all of you for coming. I hope that you can find a way to live your Pura Vida today.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for being here. And as always, if there's something that you want to hear more about Costa Rica or you want to share your travel stories and the reason why travel is meaningful to you, connect with us. Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. You can find us at Men and Community. Really, really excited to have you, to connect with you and to have you reach out to us.
Yeah. And if you were one of the people on those trip and you have something to say to us, please do it. If it's bad, send it to us personally. If it's good, send it to us in social media.
And if it's Kyle, let us know if we're allowed to disclose your nickname.
Absolutely. Pura Vida, everybody.